Utah is an interesting ship to me because she has basically two different lives. We'll go through both those, but the first thing is she starts her career off as a battleship number 31, back in August of 1911. She's going to be the oldest style of battleship we talk about here. She still runs on coal and also has a 12-inch gun. Now, we do have newer battleships, like, for example, Arizona and Oklahoma. But the problem is they're running on oil. The English do not have the oil reserves or the stockpiles to be able to use our newer style battleships. Battleship Texas number 35 will be sent to fight along with the combined fleet initially. Texas is important to me because she's the only U.S. ship to fire her guns at anchor in World War I and World War II. Trust me, there will be a test later. Be ready for that. So that being said, the war ends in 1918. At that point, President Woodrow Wilson is called upon to sign the Treaty of Versailles. He boards the USS George Washington in New York and then heads off to Brest, France. Along with them are three important ships that are what is called his honored cordon, the ships there to protect him: Utah, Oklahoma, Arizona. Now here's the interesting factoid. The whole aspect of the Treaty of Versailles was supposed to be the treaty for the war to end all wars. And these three ships are lost in basically the first 18 minutes of December 7th, 1941. Sometimes fact is crazier than fiction. Shortly after this, we will bring our American battleships back to the Atlantic coast, but at this point, the United States is so busy it's maintaining a regional two-inch. Before this, we find ourselves having two major treaties in 1922. The London Naval Treaty, followed by the Washington Naval Treaty. It is felt by powers around the world that the rush for the dreadnought or the battleship led to World War I. So it's going to limit navies on the number of capital ships or battleships they can have and what tonnage they can have. Because of her age, Utah is on the chopping block. Interestingly though, this is where her second life comes in. It is felt that if they took off the main guns from her, she could use the training shop. So that would begin shortly about 1928 and end in 1930. So this is her final configuration taken in August of 1941. So what she is now is a training ship at HC-16. She has changed her crew line. Because of this, she is going to be used for two major roles. First off, anti-aircraft guns for anti-aircraft training. She will carry one of every single type of anti-aircraft gun the United States has. By 1941, that will include the quad-mount 1.1 anti-aircraft gun, 75 caliber. Inside the hoppers, they would carry 5 rounds, and it would fire rapid fire versus a single-shot anti-aircraft gun like Arizona would have at the time of 1941. But the second major thing that she takes on is the fact that she can be used as a remote control enemy, and I'll show that to you in just a second. So, if you look at the control tower on her rear, that is how they would control her. Now, I'm not sure a lot about this because, unfortunately, a lot of the information and details are not given to us at this point. I'm constantly asked what the range was. I do not have the answer for that. But a mothership would come alongside her, and within a certain range, they were able to control the direction and the speed of the Utah herself. Now, the main thing they would use her for is dive bombing. So this is it taken from the mothership in front of the control console that controls the Utah. So because of that, she got a thicker deck. So imagine thicker teak wood to protect her. Dive bombers would drop flour sacks or bomblets on her deck. When we finally get to 1942, after the victory at Midway, several of the pilots were asked, how were you able to anticipate the Kido Battalion, the Japanese strike force, and what they were doing? They stated that training on ships like the Utah, they were able to anticipate the movements of those ships. By September, she comes to join the fleet that has now been moved as of spring of 1940 here in Pearl Harbor, 2,500 miles away from their normal home in San Diego. She'll move up right here at what is called spot number 11. You look over here to our left, you'll see that single motor right there. That's spot number 10. That is where the TNG will receive those. Now, most of the ships that are here on the morning of December 7th are here because the Admiral's inspection, December 8th. Utah is out there. She stayed put out to sea every day. On December 7th, 1941, 183 aircraft from the first wave of launched by aircraft bound to Kido Battalion, 220 miles north of Oahu at 6 a.m. They're going to make landfall a little after 7 o'clock. First place that is hit that morning is Houston. You look over here to the Lion Eyes. Here's the point of highest elevation. Look down to the left. what looks like a lower crescent moon shape. Just in the valley below that, there's Wheeler Army Reservoir. 15 minutes later, the first planes that come in are actually going to circumnavigate Ford Island. So coming in from my left and going in from the west. I'll show you that in just a second. So everybody has seen where we are in East Division. So we're moving away in a clockwise fashion down to Hangar 6. And that is going to be at 7:55 that morning. First 9 bombs come racing down to that area, which is where the seaplanes are. So, all around the harbor, 185 vessels sound general quarters and hope to fight back. Next group, showing up almost a minute later, are going to be 4 torpedo planes coming in from the north. The Twin Towers to the north, yes, New York is not the only place that has the term Twin Towers. In that direction, 4 torpedo planes are going to be skimming in the water about 20 to 30 feet off the water. The sun is rising over your right shoulder at this point, so you can imagine the shadows are in their direction. They misidentify the Utah, thinking that she's a battleship out of place. 3 of the 4 torpedo planes drop their torpedoes simultaneously, of which 2 slam into the Utah on her port side. The third one somehow misses her entirely, and where the Hercules is over here to our right, slams into the stern of the USS Raleigh. One thing I need to mention very quickly is Ford Island is much closer to the Utah today than she was in 1941. If you look to the right of the bus, you're going to see the concrete slab that is raised. That is the shoreline, 1941. So just imagine that distance that they have to swim. And some of these men are going to be strafed or machine gunned from the air. But we'll get to that story in a minute. One of the individuals who does not run from the ship is Chief Waterman Peter Tomich. He races down to the bowels of the ship, and he's going to be working 2 major things. First off, he's going to be tending to the boilers to ensure that the ship does not blow up with the boilers. Secondly, he's going to be working the dischargers. Have you guys ever seen James Cameron's Titanic, 1997? Of course. Okay, just making sure. So when the ship is sinking, you can see when the lifeboats are being launched, how it's releasing water. He's doing the same thing with the Utah, trying to buy her precious minutes. It's going to work for a time, but unfortunately, at age 12, the lines break, and this photo was taken exactly at that point as she gave up the ghost and rolled to the north. So you can imagine that there were individuals still trapped on board the Utah. Many of them, many of the crew members were able to get off and swim over the Ford Island. Unfortunately, again, there are still some that are still stuck inside the Utah. That being said, almost immediately during the attack itself, men start racing over from the U.S. Navy, which was to the Utah, which is rolled over. You can see the rigging race rolled over. As they continue to work feverishly, they're only going to be able to get 1 man out of the Utah. His name, Jack Bassett. I think there's a little bit of a survivor's guilt with them, but we'll get to that in a minute. But you can imagine that's a pretty harrowing situation trying to help the hull to try to get to the Utah. The unfortunate thing is he will be the only man that will recover from the USS Utah. By the time all is said and done, Utah will lose 58 men. 52 were lost inside the Utah itself. The rest were stranded while they were swimming to Ford Island. Now Utah is an interesting scenario because initially when the event was over, we had 21 vessels that were damaged or sunk. So if you're in the military, the idea is to triage which ships can I get back into service as quickly as I can. Because they know that Utah is a total loss, she keeps being pushed off to the side. But she is also a navigational hazard, so they have to do something. As we get to 1943, they are able to raise the Oklahoma. So I apologize, spoiler alert on that. But they looked at the Oklahoma and said, if we can do that with the Utah as well. So what we did is they built one military refinement. The flag right there is one of those foundations. And you can see this photo from 1944 of them working to attempt to raise the USS Utah. They will eventually be able to get her to about the 19th. But unfortunately, that is where the luck of the recovery operation ends. Look at how far the Utah is from that foundation. Because of that, the gantry, or the fulcrum, is way too far from it. Because of that, the lines would begin to break, and Utah would eventually settle on her port side into the harbor itself. And then finally work her way over to a 37-degree angle, which is what she sits at today. If you look over to the left towards your stern, you can still see the cables hanging down from the attempted recovery boat at 19. Now, it was originally desired that they were going to raise the European tension. After the war, we have a new individual who takes command of the Pacific Fleet. His name is Admiral Radford. Radford's an important individual for a couple of reasons. First off, he is a Pearl Harbor survivor. His duty station was the USS Dolphin on that morning. He also takes command of the fleet and has a differing opinion than his predecessor of what to do with these ships. His first move is in 1950, placing the first memorial on the USS With doing so, he has set a precedent for Utah, even though she's not a memorial yet. Fast forward to 1958. The U.S. federal government now is deciding where shall we put our first federal memorial to World War II. The chosen location, of course, the USS Arizona. From 1958 to 1962, Alfred Price's memorial is built and dedicated Memorial Day 62. At that point, now we have the state of Utah asking, what about us? That is going to begin the conversation, and eventually it is agreed Utah should be able to get her own memorial. But I want to leave one other thought on this. The USS Arizona was done with federal money. It was done with state money. It would be completed 10 years later, in 1972, and dedicated Memorial Day of that year. Dedicated to the 58 men lost of the USS Utah. That being said, as I mentioned, 52 men are still on board the Utah to this day. Utah and Arizona are very unique ships. If you're a crew member of that ship on the last muster roll, you have the right, if you so choose, upon your passing, you can be cremated and interred or buried aboard your ship. 14 have chosen to do that aboard the Utah itself. If you look over here to my right, you see the grave right there. That is where the urn is physically handed down to the chief diver that is weighing in the water. The next of kin is the chief diver intentionally swims backwards, keeping where the final is on the next of kin into the Now you'll notice that the starboard rail likes to surface the water. About the halfway point, there is a hatch that's open. When they get to that point, the urn is held higher, letting the family know it's the last of the force of the family. Then they break the surface and place the urn into the Utah itself. Then the collection is That being said, Utah is a very important ship to me because she is known as the Forgotten One. Hopefully, as more of these tours are being able to be pushed out, that moniker can go away. That being said, that is my first presentation on the Utah. Take a couple photos. If you have any other questions, please ask. From here, we will be heading to the Oklahoma. Welcome to Battleship number 37, USS Oklahoma. Oklahoma was born the same year as Battleship Arizona in 1916. This is what she would have looked like at the time of World War I. So, as I mentioned before, unlike Utah, she runs on oil and also has a 14-inch gun. So, you can see the revolutionary jump between the Utah and the Oklahoma. As I mentioned before, sorry, I'm going to just touch on this briefly. The United States enters the war the following year, in 1917. Oklahoma and Arizona are not sent initially until early 1918 to be a part of the combined fleet. And of course, the war ends before they can actually see action. That being said, we also mentioned the fact of the Treaty of Versailles, Utah, Oklahoma, and Arizona bringing President Woodrow Wilson to Brest, France for that. Shortly after that, she as well as Arizona are brought back to Norfolk, Virginia, but they're not going to stay in the Atlantic Fleet too long. By the time we get to the late 20s, the United States is now starting to look at the Pacific waters and ask, where is our Navy for this? So we start getting a huge shot in the arm in our Navy and creating a two-ocean Navy. Arizona and Oklahoma would be two of the battleships sent to the Pacific Fleet. Now the idea, after the crash of 1929, is the idea of building what is called the standard battleship. Standard size, standard speed, and what have you. Sounds great on paper, but the problem is going to be, if I create a new product, all the rest of the battle fleet has to get it. So you can imagine all these battleships are constantly going into dry dock to be modernized, and of course they're not getting the same modernizations at the same time. So that's what we're going to find with these battleships. Again, Oklahoma and Arizona being two of them. The first thing that both of them are going to get together is a major upgrade in the 1930s. And that is going to be a structural difference. This is the last formal photo taken of Oklahoma in 1941, February. She's going to get what are called tripods. These are the new structures that are built on top of her. The first ship to get this is going to be the battleship Texas, and this is a British idea. So we got the idea from the British themselves on this. It's very distinct because very few ships have this design. It was felt that the birdcage is what Oklahoma originally had, like Arizona, were not very well suited for them in high seas and top water, which we had seen in other ships previously. Now, as we get into the late 30s and early 40s, we're going to find them getting modernized again multiple times. The last time they're going to be in Bremerton together, which is just outside of Tacoma, is during December 1940 through February 41. What's interesting is the two aspects that are being upgraded on these two ships. Oklahoma is going to be getting a thicker deck of 3.5 inches, and Arizona is going to be getting a thicker torpedo blister of 13 inches of steel. Now, they both are going to have similar components, but it's interesting because of the facts of what kills both ships. Arizona is killed by an aerial bomb from up top, and Oklahoma is killed by torpedoes from the side. So it's amazing that the two are getting the opposite upgrades at that point. They both joined the Pacific Fleet out here, again, shortly after February 1941, and joined the training regiment again, 3-week rotations, 2 weeks at sea, 1 week at home. Arizona is what is called a flagship. She has an admiral on board, and she's in charge of a division. Divisions are 3 ships. In this particular case, Arizona, Nevada, and her sister ship, Oklahoma, are all part of Battleship Division 1. So wherever Arizona goes, these other 2 ships go along with her. As we get into August of 1941, the United States signs the Atlantic Charter. At that point, the United States agrees that Germany is the greatest threat. So you can imagine at that point, the Pacific Fleet is beginning to be cannibalized. Oilers and destroyers are being sent through the Panama Canal to go and assist the Atlantic Fleet, because we're looking at U-boats right off the Atlantic coast. Husband Kimmel, commander of the Pacific Fleet, still has a job to do. And you can imagine he's looking across the ocean. Since 1931, Japan has been at war, starting with Manchuria and starting in 1937 against China. So you can imagine that the United States has to have some skin in the game in this. And they're going to have to look at themselves as a deterrent. As August ends, the United States starts finding herself more and more with more intense opportunities for training. Now, as we get into October, bad luck is going to start running into a couple of these ships. Again, Arizona and Oklahoma being 2 of them. Arizona is supposed to be going to Bremerton in early November to get radar and 1.18 aircraft guns, similar to what we saw on the USS Utah. But unfortunately, on the 22nd of October, they're out at sea about 6 o'clock at night. Now imagine the formation like a triangle. Arizona and Oklahoma make up the base, Nevada is in the rear making up the point. For some reason, about 6:30, Oklahoma falls out of formation. It continues to get closer to the Arizona itself. By the time anybody realizes it, it's too late. In these blackout conditions, Arizona and Oklahoma both throw their lights on, hoping that the other ship is going to notice that they're out of formation. Unfortunately, Oklahoma slams into the port side or left side of the Arizona at frame 60, causing a 22-foot-long gash to be imposed onto the Arizona. Because of this, Arizona will not be able to go to Bremerton. Instead, she's going to be sent to dry dock, not too far from us, and spend just shy of a month in dry dock. By the end of November, she is finally out of dry dock, and she'll be heading out to sea again. But Oklahoma goes back in. By the 26th of November, 1941, the United States finds herself with the first war warning from Washington, D.C. There's a photo squadron on this island called VJ-1, or Utility Squadron 1. They have two major jobs, bringing mail from San Diego, but they're also the photography squadron for the Pacific Fleet. This photo was taken on that day. If you look at the dry docks, take a look at dry dock number 1. Most people misidentify this photo and claim that this is the battleship Arizona. It's not. It's the Oklahoma. Taken on that date. It's pretty amazing, at least to me, to be able to tell a story and look at a photograph that backs it up. So, she'll stay in there until December 1st, 1941. At that point, she's pulled out and goes with the Arizona out to sea one last time. Now, as I mentioned before, you go out to sea usually for 2 weeks. That being said, Battleship Division 1 needs to be back in Pearl Harbor on December 8th, 1941 for Admiral's inspection. So because of that, they're going to be putting in 2 weeks worth of work in 1 week. Culminating on the evening of Thursday the 4th of December 1941 in a live fire exercise at night. It will be the last time Oklahoma and Arizona fire their 14-inch guns. The following morning, Battleship Division 1 returns to Pearl Harbor the final time. Now, as we get in, we are going to be experiencing a much higher volume of ships than we're used to here at Pearl Harbor because of the Admiral's inspection. This is going to be almost a shell game of trying to figure out where to place these ships. So, Ford Island, yet again, we are down here at spot number 5, where the Missouri sits today. So the normal parking spots are down at the very end of the line, down here for Battleship Division 1. Sorry, my phone is right here. And Battleship Division 1 is usually down here. So, that being said, first thing they're going to do is take Arizona out of her normal place. The end of the line is usually where Arizona is slated to go. She and Nevada swap places for the weekend. Because of this, Nevada is going to take Arizona's spot, Arizona takes Nevada's. The reason why, Nevada has to offload black powder on Saturday. So to do so, they pull her to the very end of the line, keeping her away from everything else. So Arizona's spot is now utilized. Arizona moves 1 spot forward, and as she does so, she just gets orders at this point that she's going to San Pedro, California for Christmas. Because that, an oiler comes alongside her and tops her off with 1.4 million gallons of oil. And then the repair ship Vestal moors alongside her to prepare her for dry dock on Monday. And of course, she'll be heading out Saturday the 13th. In doing so, we now have blocked out all of those spots that Battleship Division 1 usually moors. Oklahoma is still waiting in the channel for a spot to moor up. It's finally decided to move her outboard, spot number 5, where the USS Missouri sits today. This will be the first time and only time in 1941 she's down here with Battleship Division 4. That being said, it's now 11 o'clock. Everybody's in the harbor that's going here. The problem is though, Oklahoma is now the first ship to be inspected on Monday because of her position. She's been out at sea for a week. They're going to throw the watertight doors and lock them in the upper and the open position. And also, in many cases, they're going to open the portholes, trying to air the ship out. This is definitely the days before air conditioning. You don't want the Admiral passing out because of the mustiness. Unfortunately, this puts her in a very vulnerable position on the morning of December 7th, 1941. So, 7:55. Imagine those 9 dive bombers I was talking about earlier flying right over our heads. This is oriented correctly now. Hangar 6 is right behind us, and this is where the first 9 bombs rained down at 7:55 that morning. As I mentioned earlier, 185 vessels here. All of them are going to Sound General Quarters. Oklahoma is going to come under attack very shortly after all of this. About 2 minutes later, 7:57, 35 torpedo planes are going to be working their way through the southeast lock, working their way towards the battle line, perpendicularly. Now, you can imagine, as they're coming out, they have 2 prime targets. The Oklahoma, which would be here in front of us, and just to the left of it, the West Virginia. Instantaneously, both these ships will receive 9 torpedoes each. West Virginia is in a better position. She has a captain as well as crew who are trained in counterflooding. Also on top of that, she has more of a water tightness. Because of that, West Virginia is going to sink straight down. Oklahoma is not so fortunate. Just like I mentioned before with the Utah, there are heroes on board. Father Schmidt is a Catholic chaplain on board. As the ship is beginning to roll, he notices that a porthole is open, and on the other side is a 40-foot whaleboat. There's this possibility of safety. The problem is he's not able to get out of the porthole, but around him are 12 sailors. Very quickly, he's going to push them all through the porthole and get them to safety. At that point, it's his turn. They're calling to him, "Chappie, come on, we'll get you through." He states, "No, I can't make it through. But wait here. I hear other voices." Unfortunately, this will be the last he's ever heard from again. In one of the turrets, we have a fresh ensign, or an 01. Flaherty is his name. As the ship is starting to roll over, I-beams start coming down from the ceiling. Using what has to be colossal strength, he holds one of the I-beams up and keeps the flashlight on the exit out, allowing every man in his gun crew to escape. For this, he will receive the Medal of Honor posthumously for sacrificing himself for his crew. Oklahoma, she does not have much time. Arizona will explode at 8:06. 1 minute later at 8:07, Oklahoma rolls over. You can see the battleship Maryland here, and you can also see down below the crews trying to rescue men from the USS Oklahoma. Oklahoma has a crew this morning of 1,381 men. Now you can imagine civilians from the dockyards came out here and started trying to cut through the torpedo blister. Remember, this is 13 inches of steel, even during the attack itself. Within the first little over 24 hours, they're able to recover 32 survivors from the Oklahoma. So they do better with the Oklahoma than they did with the Utah. But the problem is, this is the last they're going to get out. The toughest part to talk about with this is the aspect of these men who are still alive. Imagine being here on Ford Island. I know this is difficult, but bear with me. Imagine hearing tapping coming from there. They're tapping in Morse code. Because of this, survivors would put cotton in their ears, and that tapping would be heard up until Christmas. All told, 429 men will lose their lives with the Oklahoma, the majority physically inside the Oklahoma itself. As I mentioned before, 21 vessels heavily damaged or sunk. The Navy is now working on triage, on what ships can we get back into the fight, and of course at that point they look at the Oklahoma. Imagine that that command structure working its way into the channel. The widest point of the channel is only 300 feet wide, so Oklahoma has to be moved somehow, some way. Now, we saw a little bit of a glimpse of what happened with the Oklahoma when we were looking at the USS Utah. Where the parking lot is here, imagine that is where the gantries were in this particular case. So from starting in 1942 and ending in June of 1943, they will raise the USS Oklahoma. Thank you. Shortly after she's raised, she's brought to dry dock number 2 and pumped out. First thing they're going to do is collect the human remains, 429 of them. You can imagine they've been in oily water, almost unidentifiable. The majority of them are put in what is called Halava Cemetery, which is not too far from our visitor center, and they will stay there till 1949. That being said, Punchbowl National Cemetery is established at that point. They're all brought up there together, section Q as in Quebec. The Oklahoma herself stays here until 1947 and is sold for scrap after the war. The Hercules is brought from San Diego to tow her to the breakers, and she gets about 500 miles east of the Big Island when she hits a storm. The patches they put over her torpedo hits start taking on water, and she starts taking on water and sinking very quickly, almost dragging the Hercules down with her. They cut the lines and she sinks in deep water. So at this point, you'd think the story is basically over. The Oklahoma is now at sea, and the men have had a dignified burial for now. As we get into the early 2000s, the state of Oklahoma and the Oklahoma Survivors Association asked, "We had the second greatest loss of life that morning. Why is there a memorial to the Arizona, not us?" Navy agrees. The memorial here is placed where the men would have mustered or would have had roll call after the events of December 7th. So this is what is gifted to them, and the memorial is established December 7th, 2007. So the memorial is very unique to me. Anybody ever see a U.S. Navy ship enter or exit a harbor? Okay, perfect. Out here in Hawaii, it's always summer, basically, so we will wear summer whites. And they come to the railing of the ship and stand at attention called manning the rails. So unlike other memorials, each of them are individualized. 429 men that are fence posts or rails manning the rails of the Oklahoma itself. The black structure right here is supposed to be the bow or the front of the Oklahoma going straight through time. Now, that being said, one last thing is a piece of the story. A friend of mine by the name of Ray Emery. He was a Pearl Harbor survivor from the USS Honolulu. He spent the last 30 years of his life tracking down the unknowns of December 7th. As we get into 2011, 2012, he's reaching out to an organization called DPAA, Defense Prisoner of War Missing in Action Accounting Agency. Try saying that 5 times fast. He tells them that through his research, he knows one individual who's in this mass burial pit. And you can imagine they're quick to say no. He's a senior non-commissioned officer from the Navy. Do you think no is in his vocabulary? No. That being said, eventually in 2013, they will exhume that crypt and find out he was correct. But here's the interesting thing. There were actually 10 in it. So they agree that the only way to do this correctly is to bring all of them together. So as I mentioned, 429 war unknowns of the Oklahoma. By December 7th, 2021, the 80th anniversary, they will identify all but 33 of them. So, going back to our individuals. 2017, Father Schmidt is identified. As they went through what is called a service jacket, which is every piece of paperwork you have from your military career, they find out that he was put up for a Silver Star posthumously for his actions. His family never got it. On the evening of the 76th anniversary, over here to my right, his family received his Silver Star finally for his actions that day. Ezzy Flaherty was number 300 identified in January of 2021. Interestingly, I was asked earlier, have I done presentations for families? My first tour I did. Had a couple, they began to cry as I mentioned his story. I thought this story hit them. They slipped me their cell phone. It was the honor guard for him when he was identified. So I got to meet his extended family. So there's an amazing aspect of being able to still experience this. Now that being said, we're now divorced from this topic by about 81 years and some change. DPAA is finished with the Oklahoma for now. They do have the DNA on file, but for some reason the families have not come forward. You can imagine in some cases they were the end of their line. Other cases, families have probably not gotten the news. But that being said, they're still working on things for the events of December 7th. They're currently working on 2 ships, the battleships West Virginia and California. So it's amazing, as we are now 81 years post, we're still writing the story of December 7th as we find these individuals, give them a face, give them a name, and bring them home. They are looking at other unknowns of December 7th, but right now they're focusing on those 2 ships. So it's amazing that an organization is still writing the history of December 7th. That being said, that is the Oklahoma. Please take your opportunity, take some photos. Father Schmidt is going to be on the last row, 6 from the left.
Do they know where the Oklahoma is now?
Unfortunately not. I mean, you can imagine in the vast ocean, it's difficult to figure that part out. I mean, we have a basic idea about 500 miles east of the island is where it was lost. But you can imagine as it sinks to the bottom, they oscillate in so many directions. And also, we don't even know how deep that is. I mean, someone was asking that earlier. 2-3 miles maybe? I think it's pretty deep. You know, we're in the middle of the ocean.
So we've just finished the tour and we got to see the USS Utah, like where it is laying now, and overall it was really impressive, but we also got to see the USS Oklahoma Memorial, which was also really cool. So I really enjoyed the tour. Don't forget to like and subscribe buttons, and I'll see you guys in the next video. See ya!